This is the Today with Tally podcast.
And welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast, folks. We have a great show in store for you today. Look, and this is a very serious show. Typically, we talk about a lot of perseverance, resilience. We talk about therapies for post-traumatic stress. I mean, we tell a bunch of stories here on the Today with Tally podcast, but this one here is extremely important. And as you all know, I get hundreds of emails a month from veterans out there who believe that they've been caught up in the spider web, if you will, of military injustice, of veteran injustice. And we're going to talk about that today. But further, we're going to talk about false accusations that come out of the U.S. military, like sexual assault, sexual harassment, and domestic violence. Now, our next guest is Arvis Owens. He's a U.S. Navy veteran, and this man was accused of 7 counts of sexual assault while he was in the Navy. And let me just read a little bit here to kind of set the story up. And then we'll have Arvis come out and we're going to tell his story and what needs to happen in this country for military justice reform. Now, Arvis claims the largest military justice scandal in the history of the United States military continues on today, and it's multiplying year after year. This alleged scandal has involved multiple presidents, members of Congress, admirals, generals, commanders at all levels, judges, prosecutors, and military investigators. The MeToo movement sparked pressure on military leaders with 2 metrics: prosecutions and convictions. Now, a commander's record of prosecutions and convictions were reviewed by the Senate Armed Services Committee prior to any promotion. If a leader did not send a case to court-martial, the case was reviewed by the next higher authority. Many men still suffer from the crushing weight of being falsely accused and wrongly convicted in military courts. And to date, there has been little to no action to review and remedy any of these cases. Now, military cases do not get unanimous verdicts. There is no conviction integrity unit or any innocence project in the military. Now, Arvis has indeed provided me with a slew of evidence supporting his documents and backing up his claims. Now, Arvis believes the American people deserve to know about this injustice and how there needs to be military justice reform to ensure wrongful convictions and imprisonments aren't happening for the sake of meeting quotas. Ruining lives in meeting quotas, that's not a very honorable thing to do. And I know when I was in the military, we were preached honor, courage, and commitment. Now, Arvis also says that, look, why is it that female service members are typically always believed, but very rarely male service members are not? And with that, we're honored to be joined by Arvis Owens. How are you, sir?
I'm good, sir. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, this has been a long time coming. Us chatting and meeting. I always, when we talk cases like this and stories like this, I like to back up a lot of the information with receipts. And look, you're about as credible as they get. I have received a lot of documents from you, backing up all of these accusations and claims, and it almost feels as if you are this victim here, caught up in a lot of these messes that so many U.S. male service members get caught up in and really get their lives ruined.
Brian, I wanted two things to start. One, I want to say our hearts go out to true victims, right? We don't want women to be raped, sexually assaulted, experience domestic violence. We believe true victims. We believe that they deserve justice first and foremost. What we're talking about here is a subset of false accusers, right? And then the second thing is I want to thank you for having the courage to tackle this topic, because it is very sensitive and it is polarizing. And so many of the military-centric podcasters are afraid to do it. There have been very few with the courage to tackle this topic.
Look, I agree. I have daughters. I'm an honorable man. I'm a law-abiding citizen. I'm a protector. And people that hurt others, especially when it comes to sexual assault, and I got one remedy for that, and I probably can't say it on here.
Gotcha.
But eliminated 100% from this world. I have, like I said, I have daughters.
Right.
And even if I didn't have daughters,
right,
I have a moral compass.
Exactly.
And, if these cases are real and factual 100%, these men need to be dealt with. And even sometimes women are on the other end of this, and they need to be dealt with as well. Now, what we're talking about today is folks being wrongfully accused of committing heinous crimes that will ultimately ruin not only your military career, but post-military coming into the civilian sector with a horrifying record that follows you for the rest of your life. Now, when you were in the U.S. Navy, you were accused of sexual assault, 7 counts of sexual assault. Tell me this story briefly and how this came to be to hold folks accountable for not only lying, but to fight for others that are caught in this trap of injustice. And you have become a national veteran advocate.
Thank you for that, Brian. So I was, we're going to go back to 2012. I was an active duty Navy commander. That's an 05. And it was a civilian coworker. Now, I want to apologize first and foremost is I am married. I should not have done it. This was an extramarital situation. So it was a civilian coworker who accused me of sexual assault. So we go to court martial, and she claimed things such as she didn't raise her pencil skirt. I didn't raise it, that it went up automatically, causing her legs to open, her to straddle me and open mouth kiss me. But in her mind, she was not consenting. And then coming back to do that again. So 2013, I go to court martial. And in the military at that time, I believe it's recently changed. The convening authority that brings you to court picks your jury panel. So he picks the people you choose from. So that happens. I agree to testify in my own defense. That jury finds me not guilty of 6 of the 7 counts of sexual assault. And then during sentencing, my accuser reverses herself again and tells an inconsistent statement, because you can't say she said a lie. You have to call it an inconsistent statement during sentencing. So they asked to revote the 7th count of sexual assault. They said, hey, can we revote that? We messed up. They go, no, you can't. So they also found me guilty of violating a general order. And the judge said, we have a problem. There's no evidence he did. And we find out later they don't even have a copy of the general order. They said I violated it. And then they also found me conduct unbecoming an officer, which is the catch-all, soliciting someone other than your wife. That was true. So then we go back to the judge and we say, well, can we get a new trial? She says, no, we don't want to do this again. I was facing over 30 years in prison. I got 0. I received a dismissal, which is the officer equivalent of a dishonorable discharge. And I was forced to register as a sex offender. So post-trial, we go to the judge and we go to the panel and said, look, you asked to revote your verdict. Enough of them agreed to write letters to the convening authorities saying, we messed up. This guy's innocent. And what's bigger, Brian, is they didn't even like me, because one of them said, we don't like him, but he did not do this. I want you to think about that, your audience to think about that for a second. So we thought the convening authority might give me a new trial. My lawyer said, no, they don't want to see this again because there's so much pressure on the military to get convictions. When I brought up the financial incentive that she was getting for this, she had filed a civil lawsuit against the military, against the base where we worked, but not me. And so I said, hey, she's filing a civil suit. She's trying to get money. They would not give me that evidence. What they said instead is, you can bring it up to the jury and that's it. And I was thankful for not being sued, but if you said I did this, why wouldn't you? Right? So long story short, we go to the appellate court and they said, well, just because the panel said that, they made a mistake doesn't mean that they were being truthful with you. So they give me a new convening authorities action. So the convening authority is the commander in charge of the case. And they first say, well, we never got any letters, but thankfully they sent a copy to my lawyer. And my lawyer said, yeah, you did. And then the military found them. And then they wrote a letter to the appellate court saying, we don't want this guy to get an appellate review. So what message do you send them? So they uphold the verdict. They did throw out the charge, the conviction on not following a general order, because again, there was no evidence and they didn't even have a copy of the general order to say it. So this jury didn't like me, but even they had a problem convicting me. So I immediately started reaching out to media to try to get attention on this, and I got zero. But ironically enough, those same people that I went to started sending me other men who had been falsely accused. And that's how I became an advocate. I never felt worthy, Brian, to be that advocate, right? Not the best husband, not the best father. I wanted someone else to take it. I became an advocate because I could find no one to do it the way I think it should be done. And that's how I got here.
What led to the accuser alerting the authorities of accusing you of sexual assault?
So I believe the incentive was money, because at that time, the military was under intense pressure to get convictions. And so you didn't need evidence. You didn't need evidence to get a conviction. The money was a powerful incentive. And to this date, I don't know how much she was paid. But I do know that they had to get a conviction in order for me, for sex assault, in order to be paid, for her to be paid. So think about it. If they overturned that verdict, they were scared she would go to the media and there would be negative repercussions for the military.
So could it be possible that she targeted you because you were a higher ranking officer in the military?
I don't know that. And so I won't say whether it's true or not, because I'm not sure. What I will say, though, is the thing that really started is there was an Air Force 05 in Europe that really got a lot of media attention. And so what I'm speculating is, because that was so upfront in the public, the military was afraid, oh, here's another 05. And so, like I said, they wanted to get a conviction to show Congress they were taking it seriously. And let me back up a little bit. I want to give people this metaphor. So did the military have a problem with sexual assaults? They did. But it's all about how you come up with solutions and you execute them. The metaphor I would give your audience is, you've got rats in a house, Brian, and you want to get rid of them. So their solution was to set the house on fire and burn it to the ground with the family inside, with all their possessions. Right? That's one way to approach it, but that's not the correct way. And so targeted, I'm not sure, but yes, that's how this all started, is they opened up the aperture to allow false accusations to happen. Think divorce proceedings, child custody hearings. Think one of the benefits that a victim got, I like to say accuser, is, let's say you don't like the base you're at. You get assigned to a new base, right? So if you don't like where you are and you want to get assigned, you get that. Is if you're failing. If I could share another case with you, we had someone accused in Kentucky and the civilian police got involved. So the civilian police investigate, And she admits that she was in danger of being kicked out because she had failed the physical standards of that service. And so that it was consensual. So based on her own confession, it was videotaped and there was a government investigator in the room when she gave it. The civilian police dropped the case. 1 year later, Brian, the military picked it back up. So the guy's like, wait, I was cleared of this. He gets an attorney who's so confident that he can win the case, a civilian attorney. He goes, I got a video confession and an active agent who was in the room to hear it. Like, this is a slam dunk. He tells him, I won't charge you if I lose, right? You don't have to pay me any money because this is ridiculous. He takes it to court, and the military will not allow him to use the video confession of the accuser, and they won't make it was a CID agent. They won't make the CID agent available to testify. He loses. He goes to prison for the same exact situation. He has several family members die, and he's eventually released. We've had members who had DNA evidence to prove their innocence. It was thrown out and not allowed in court. We've had people confess to receiving payments and lying in a military court. The conviction was still upheld. And so I want your audience to understand, I'm not talking about like on the line or a little blurry. I'm talking about the military having training where they're telling soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardians that if you have one alcoholic beverage, you can't consent, with a caveat. It's the person being penetrated who can't consent. So you take your spouse out for your anniversary and you have one glass of champagne. And now, are you ready to say your partner's a sex offender? That's the type of situations we find ourselves in.
So are you trying to say that the military is basically coaching these women and giving them the information that they need, that they know that they have a card in their hand that they can use at any time, basically an ace in the hole, to say, hey, if something's going wrong in my command, I can always say rape, sexual assault, etc.
Get out of jail free card?
Yeah, it's a ace in the hole, if you will. If something isn't going their way, or if there's, things that aren't just going, they could be bad soldiers, they could be bad Marines, they could be, just horrible at their job. But they know that their way out of all of this is to say, he raped me.
Some of them,
sexual assault, sexual harassment, etc., to basically enhance their career moving forward, because everyone's scared to even bring it up, because they know that we've got to believe her. And with all of these accusations that she's saying out there, could have been why she maybe isn't a good Marine or isn't a good soldier. So we're going to put everything on the back of this guy, and we're going to lead him down this dark, sordid path that typically will always end in perhaps veterans taking their own lives, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, and on and on and on. Now, this get out of jail free card, explain that to the audience.
So thank you for that. So to answer your question, some of them, yes. We want to say that there are true victims out there who deserve justice, but many of them, yes. And I want to put that in context before I explain it. There was a defense advisory committee started by President Obama's term that they did a snapshot of cases of sexual assault that went to court-martial, that's trial, without probable cause, and it was 41% in one snapshot and 35% in another. So what they would argue is, hey, there's only 2% chance of false accusation. I always ask, how'd you get that? How big was the sample and where? Was that military only? Was that civilian? And no one answers. I am saying the Defense Advisory Committee for the Investigations, Prosecutions, and Defense of Sexual Assault that was started 2015, 2016 time in Obama's term, guess what? They did this study and they found this. So here's how the get out of jail free card works. You could receive a transfer from a base. So if you're on a ship, you don't want to be on one, and we have cases like that. You're going to get MST designation, military sexual trauma, and you're going to get between 70 and 100% VA disability. You are going to get help finding a job. If you have any issues in your, if you have any, they call it collateral misconduct, it's forgiven. You pop positive on a drug test, forgiven. You committed adultery or any other thing, forgiven. If you beat your spouse or did anything, it's forgiven. So I call it a get out of jail free card because that's what it essentially is. And it's a career enhancer if used as well. It's you're failing, you're having trouble with a commander. Guess what? You accuse them of that. And I want to say false accusations happen even beyond that. So I had a situation on the ship where I had a black serviceman who worked for me, and he hadn't done his job, a specific part of it, for 2 years that I found during a routine inspection, just going through a spot check. So one, I thought I was wrong because he had been audited twice, like a major audit. And I'm like, this is impossible. I can't be getting this right. So I tell the captain of the ship, I go out to the group that did the inspection. I said, I found this. Can you verify I'm seeing this right? They go, oh my God, you're right. So one, I was going to punish him for not doing what he was supposed to. And then he was going to have to fix it. So he filed charges against me and says I was being racist against him because he was black. So my captain pulls me in and he says, I've never seen this one before, right? I was investigated for 2 weeks. I was cleared, but guess what? He could not be punished for that mistake. So you had false accusations in other areas. I want to say that too. But with the get out of jail free card, if your performance is failing, if you've committed collateral misconduct, if you're in a divorce proceedings and you want custody, if you want favorable terms, which as far as the split, if you want to go to a new location, if you want the VA disability, if you want the help that comes with employment and things like that, all of that comes. And I want to make it clear, your audience, to them, so they understand. If they checked a box, even if an algorithm from the VA came up and says, hey, this is not right, this is not, they're not allowed to question. We've had investigators come to us, VA investigator, who said, hey, look, and a female VA investigator who said, look, there's fraud here. They're not allowed to investigate. We have someone who worked at a physical examination board, for instance, and she gave me 2 examples. She's a retired 05. She said there was a woman who claimed to have been raped in a country she's never been in. And they couldn't even point that out. They said, just drop it. And then she told me another one, this was a Marine Corps one, where a woman claimed she'd walked past a barracks and a lone guy had harassed her with language. And so therefore she needed benefits for the rest of her life. No evidence, no other witnesses. It was, she said, hey, I walked past and one person did it. And she gets VA disability for the rest of her life. And so again, you didn't have to have evidence. In fact, one of the documents I shared with you came to us from a military sexual trauma survivor. And she worked for a nonprofit and stopped when they were pushing cases of false accusations. They had private Facebook groups, and they would say how to win your MST, that's military sexual trauma case, with 0 evidence. I want your audience to think about this: 0 evidence. 0. And they get full benefits and they're believed. And again, this was about the time where there was the defund the police hashtag and movement. There was the Believe Women, which morphed into the MeToo movement. And so I believe that the politicians believed that they could secure more female votes by always believing. And I'll share something with you that was a surprise to me when I started researching this, is about 10 million more women vote in each presidential election. Is that women beat men when it comes to voting in every category except one, and we're tied, is if you have a 4-year degree. And so I believe that was the crux of why they wanted to do it. And it was prosecutions and convictions to get it done.
Do you know how many women veterans are receiving VA benefits for military sexual trauma? I mean, what's the percentage?
I do not have that number. In fact, one of the requests I have is to do a search, right, on the ones who got it with 0 investigation and 0 evidence, to look at that population there, to start there, and then work backwards at the lives that were destroyed in order to do that. So I do not have those numbers. I would love to get them. And that's one of my asks is I understand it's hard to believe us, right? I understand that. So I'm like, hey, let's go to VA. Let's pull those numbers. And I do know that DOW now has records of all these cases. And so I believe that's one step, Brian, to help fix this. But I do not have that number, no.
Is there a way that you could file a FOIA to get this information, of course, without names being released, of course, but just with the hard numbers of saying, 78% of all women veterans coming out have claimed military sexual trauma in the VA, and this is the treatment that they are receiving, because that right there will tell all.
Right.
Look, 7 out of 10 women or 8 out of 10 women claiming sexual assault. Is that real? I don't know. I'm not a woman. And I don't walk in those shoes. But at the end of the day, when you falsely accuse a man of doing something that he just did not do, or if it was fully consented, you are destroying so many lives out there look, you were in 05. You've been in the military for a while. And, to give honorable service, you made a mistake. You committed adultery. Okay. And you've come out and you've said, hey, look, I admit it, but I didn't do 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 like they're claiming I did. That's just not right. And there's no evidence there to back it up. As a matter of fact, I'm innocent on those charges, and they didn't even like me. And that was proven in court. But has this followed you, Arvis?
Of course it does. So I want to tell your audience what that's like. So when you get labeled a sex offender, nobody wants to hire you, right? Think about that. I've talked to employers who will hire you if you murdered someone and you serve your time. And let me be fair to them. They tell me it's liability insurance. They said, look, let's say we believe you and we hire you. And then one of our employees says you touched her in the copier room. Our insurance will pay a 7-figure settlement. No questions asked. Hey, you knew this guy was accused of this, was convicted of this, and you hired them anyway. Many of the veterans are homeless, and you're correct. A lot of them commit suicide or experience drug addiction. We had an 05 chaplain come forward to us who was connecting the ramp up in suicide rates in every service because of false accusations.
Yeah, and I just want to say something. The reason why I know is because I get a lot of these emails that do come in from men, veterans that don't want to come on camera. They don't want to go on a podcast. They don't want to tell their story because they're thinking that, more people are going to, because when you come out and you do a show like this, and you talk about accusations against yourself that are very sensitive topics, sexual assault, rape. These are some of the worst atrocities known to man. And they tell me, I don't know what to do. I can't get a job. My wife left me. I can't see my kids. And basically, I don't have a purpose to live anymore. My life has been destroyed. And what do I do, Brian? Is there any advocates out there? And you've nailed it, right? Because, and I know you are, an advocate, and that's why we're having you on the show, so you can help these folks in need. But this happens in the civilian sector all the time. But guess what? The civilian sector has a lot more resources, and they have a lot more support staff to help the accused in these types of situations. Like you were saying, there is no innocence project in the military. They have quotas, and they often believe the woman.
So let me give you an example, and I'll connect it. So a lot of these men don't come forward because they're not perfect. So the other side will argue that there is no perfect victim. So I will counter with, then why does the defendant have to be perfect to demand justice? So my example. So we have a case where 2 soldiers had a menage a trois with one woman, right? And so they're all servicemen and women. So they have sex. And then afterwards, that information gets back to the unit that this happened. And so feelings are hurt. And so the female claimed she was raped. She claimed she was raped. So the military starts the investigation. And the only thing that saved them partially was they videotaped the encounter. So she says rape. They said, well, here's the tape. They go, ooh, it's not rape. It was consensual. She was just upset that it got back to the unit. They still prosecuted the men because, one, they illegally recorded it, right? They were in a two-party state, which means everyone had to give permission to record it. They also prosecuted them for, you're not supposed to have sex that's witnessed by a third party. So threesomes are against the UCMJ, right? Or anyone watching you have sex. And so they got prosecuted for that and still went to prison. So you're right, Brian. A lot of men don't want to come forward because they're not perfect, right? They did do something. And I'll give you this example. We had a young man, he was in Alaska. He suspected his wife was having an affair. So he was deployed to Afghanistan. So he was a danger to himself in the unit. So they send him back early. Turns out she is having an affair. They reconcile, they're going to get back together, but he's still not completely trusting. So he puts a still camera, a motion sensitive camera in their bedroom, their marital bedroom. And guess what he discovers? Not only is she still having it, it's with a new guy. So now, let me be fair. You know, she was not naked. She was straddling in their marital bed on top of a guy, but they were clothed. And so he got that picture. So it was submitted to the courts, and he goes to court-martial. And what they argued was that he was getting sexual gratification from the image, basically a peeping Tom. They used the peeping Tom statute to go after him. Brian, he was not allowed to mention that his wife was having an affair, and that's why he put the camera in there. Now, so technically that is a misdemeanor, because even though it was a one-party state where he did this, Alaska, he wasn't a party to the action. So it's a misdemeanor that he had the camera in there. That is, he shouldn't have done that. But guess what? He wasn't allowed to present the true intention. Hey, look, his wife was having an affair. They dismissed the jury. His wife admitted, yes, I was having one. And the guy she was having an affair with goes, no, we weren't. So one of them's lying. They're not punished. They're forgiven because they're victims. So we go back to the adultery. They're not consistent with it. Is once you're deemed a victim, all is forgiven. And so it becomes an incentive if you're in trouble. If you're in trouble and you're getting investigated, bam. Well, now you're a victim and you're clear. So you're 100% right. I've got many men who are scared to come forward because they're not perfect. They did BDSM. I'll share with your audience. He and his wife engaged in BDSM sex. The military does not like non-vanilla sex situations. And a lot of these men are embarrassed. They don't want their mom to know. You don't want your mom to know, you like hot baby oil and, so it's, in this one case, his wife, they had a divorce dispute over a property. So he was winning the property. That's when she accused him of sexual assault. He was not allowed to present the evidence, the text messages and the emails that she sent asking him to do that BDSM behavior. So everything she claimed to do, he had done, but in the confines of a BDSM relationship with a safe word. But he wasn't allowed to present that evidence. And so you have cases like this, and I'll give you another example that I alluded to earlier. We had a man, he was an officer. His wife has an extramarital affair with a coworker. She's civilian. She gets pregnant by him. She comes clean. He divorces her. He gets custody of the daughter that they have, that they share. I want your audience to think what it takes in this country for a man to get custody of a child, much less a daughter, right? Think about what has to happen. So he gets custody of their daughter. Then she files rape charges against him. She goes to not one, but 2 civilian police precincts. They both investigate. They go, there's nothing there. She goes to a third. That third one's the military. They go, we'll take him to court-martial. Prior to court-martial, her attorneys go to his attorneys and says, if you give up custody of our daughter, I'll drop the case. He goes, no, I didn't do this. I believe in justice and the military system. Convicted, sent to prison. His mother, though, very sharp, She calls the lover of this guy's now ex-wife, and he admits that he took $10,000 and lied in military court because the military doesn't have jurisdiction over civilians. They can't prosecute him. He's civilian. So the military calls a hearing, another hearing. He's in jail now, by the way, when this happens. And the guy admits that not only did he get 10,000, Brian, he got 100,000. The 10,000 was the first installment, and that he lied. The judge says, I'm not authorized to intervene in your case. Who hears this? And we're like, then why would you hold a hearing to hear evidence of innocence if you had no authority to act in the case? So he goes to his congresswoman at the time to file an inquiry. It's the Air Force case. So they come back and they say, well, the judge had the authority, but he used his discretion. So wait, first he said he didn't have the authority. Then you said he had it, but he didn't use it. And then he comes back again and says, well, he submitted it too late. And what we would ask your audience is, wait a minute, you had a hearing to hear evidence that you deem was submitted too late, then why would you have the hearing? So I'm talking about cases like that. DNA, they're changing their story 6, 7 times. They're being coached by investigators. We have a letter from one lady who she had 2 investigators say, if you don't come out as a victim, we're going to tell your husband you're having an extramarital affair. And he was on deployment. She wrote a letter to say, she kicked them out of the house, right? So these were the tactics they were using. And Brian, they were talking in a male sense, every female you had any contact with, everyone you dated. I think the most I have dealt with is I have a young man, they talk to 170 females going all the way back to high school. And what they'll say is, hey, look, this guy did this. And so, hey, do you want to be a part of this? So what they were doing is stacking to make it more credible when the evidence was light.
So how can the military accuse and convict service members with no evidence? I mean, it sounds to me that the women here, they're all immune. It's as if they have immunity, and the men that are accused and then later convicted of these heinous crimes are left fighting for their life with really nobody in the room to help them out because they're serving time in federal military prisons and they're basically just forgotten.
Here's how they can do it. So you talked earlier, great comment. There is no unanimous jury in the military. They use small jury sizes. When I was convicted, they could do it as few as 6. I had 7. Now it's a minimum of 8, but you don't have 12, and it's not unanimous. The other thing is they decide what evidence gets in. And the military created an Office of Special Trial Counsel. So it's the top guns of prosecution. So you're wrestling your 5-year-old nephew, right? So the defense side are poorly funded. They have less experience. They have less access to resources. They recently gave the defense investigators, but they're very few. So before, when I went, the defense had no investigators. They're all on the prosecution side. And in many of these cases, Brian, they hold back evidence. So I gave you an example of mine where it was, wait a minute, she's filing civil lawsuits. She's trying to get paid. They knew how much she wanted. They wouldn't allow me access to that evidence to present to the panel. They said, you can just tell them that she sued and she didn't sue you, but we're not going to share that. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's evidence. There's a financial incentive for her to do this. So that's how they can do it. They control the evidence, what's presented, what's not presented. And they control, a lot of junior servicemen don't have the resources to hire civilian attorneys. So they take who they get. And a lot of times that's not always the best deal. And it's sad. And it's something I counsel people on. I would tell you that I've had an unlimited success rate when I get someone before they go to court martial. I say, let's tell your parents so we can get access to resources to get a good attorney. Hey, let's hire an investigator. Let's do this. And that's some advice I give. If you can't afford an attorney, well, then at least get an investigator who is from your service, who's retired. So if it's CID, get a retired CID agent or OSI so that you can have someone to do the work for you, to support you. But that's how they can do it, Brian. And there's something called the 2004 Innocence Project, I believe the bill was called. It protects everyone except military members, right? So it's in the military, you have no avenue to come out. You're right. It's your life is destroyed. People don't believe you. You're homeless, addicted to drugs. And let me share this other example with you. Some of the men are, I call them cavalier. You might call them playboys from our era. Some call them, the youth call them F-boys now. So we had a young man, he's dating 5 women at the same time, right? Now, we're not judging him, but he's doing that. Guess what? They all find out about each other. And that's how he got accused. So they come at him and they offer him a plea deal of 3 years. So I want your audience to think about it. If this guy raped 5 women, who gives him a 3-year deal? If he really did it. He says, no, I don't want the deal. And a lot of men have taken it because they're fearful. They don't think they'll get treated fairly by the military system. He doesn't take the deal. He gets found not guilty of all of the sexual assaults, but they find him guilty of assault, touching the arm without permission, touching the shoulder without permission. And he still goes to jail, I think, for greater than the 3 that they offered him. So he has addiction issues now. He is a combat veteran. That's a Marine case, by the way. So your heart goes out to these veterans because you're right. There's not a lot of resources. And you go to these nonprofits, these civilians, and most of them will turn you away. Actually, all of the ones I have tried to work with have turned you away. You go to media. Media, they don't want to touch it. They only want to talk about, hey, there's a problem with sex assaults. What about the problem with false allegations? And so, like I said, I want to thank you again and your audience for listening, because we're like, wait a minute. Don't you care about your son joining the military? It's in 2024, there was a bill proposal so that in the House, it was all men 18 to 26 would be automatically enrolled in selective service. That's the House side. On the Senate side, it was all men and women 18 to 26. So it didn't get passed. Well, guess what? This past NDAA, it's all men ages 18 to 26 will be automatically enrolled in selective service. So let me explain. People get confused and they go, well, selective service is not the draft, right? And they're right. But here's an analogy. My grocery shopping list is not shopping for groceries. But guess where I pull the items from that I'm going to go grocery shopping? From this list. So selective service is the list that we're going to go grocery shopping in the event we have a conflict. So what I ask the American public, what I ask your audience is, if you can't trust the military to be fair and just with your son, then how can they keep you safe? 3 questions. First questions. Are the best and the brightest going to join when they find out they won't be treated fairly? I believe most of them will say no. Well, the best and brightest who do join, will they stay in if they find out they won't be treated fairly? I say no. Last question. If the best and brightest won't join and the best and brightest won't stay in, who will be left to keep you safe? And will you care when your son is drafted because they can't find the capable people to join? Will you care then?
You know, and look, I've said the same thing. I went through an atrocity with the VA, and there's been a lot of folks that said, I'm never going to join the military. If this is how veterans are treated post-service, I don't want nothing to do with this. And there are a lot of daughters and sons and wives and cousins and nephews and aunts and uncles that watch what happened to young men and women after they get out, or retirees. They go to the VA and they watch their grandpa die. They watch their father die. They watch their mother go through, bad treatments. And they say, if this is it, I mean, if this is the best that our country has to offer our service members, our veterans, then why would I want to go put my life on the line to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America when our veterans aren't even getting fair treatment and aren't even being listened to. We do have a lot of patriots in this country that say, you know what, I don't care about that whole thing. I want to go fight. I want to go fight for my country. You know, it takes a special person to raise their right hand in defense of this country to say, hey, I'm going to go pick up a rifle and I'm going to go charge that hill with my brothers, because that's what I am here to do. I am here to battle the enemy, and all that other stuff I'll deal with later, you know? And I think that that's the big part of our life, is that, and a big part of our society is, we want to fight. We are going to prove our strength. We are going to prove, you know, our masculinity, and we're going to go, you know, fight, fight, fight. Well, that's what they put in your brain to do, to become a war fighter. When, I mean, these issues aren't happening downrange, you know, outside the wire when you're in the fight. They happen back here in garrison when things slow down and people get a little bored and they say, what's a good retirement plan? Oh, I remember that one time Arvis and I had, oh, yeah, that could be a good one there. And then they get coached. They have social media groups. You know, how can I get a conviction without evidence? And they start thinking, well, I can get $3,000, $4,000 a month for the rest of my life if I just do and say this. Well, yeah, well, sign me up. And that right there is the information that's being leaked to a lot of these women here. And like I said, I'm not accusing anybody of doing this. I'm just saying there are records of this that have happened. You know, you were saying, look, in a military court of law, it doesn't need to be unanimous. So it could be 4-3, 4 saying guilty, 3 saying nope, 100% innocent. Now, in the civilian sector, the DA, they need to prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt.
So let me say 3 things. So one, I want to say again, this is not all female veterans, because a lot of this information I have came from female veterans who witnessed others falsely accused, their colleagues, and they're upset about it. And so they have come forward, and I want to thank them. There are some solid female veterans doing that for us. Thank them. And then the other thing I want to say is, what you mentioned, how the veterans, the people will join regardless. I ask them, who fights for you? And that's people like you and I. And then the third thing is, in the military, it is beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's all about how you do it, right? It's subjective. So it used to be 2/3 to get a conviction. Now it's 3/4. But it's, hey, if you work for me and I put you on the panel, right, are you going to want to disappoint me? And so there's that. So one of the things we've asked for in the military, I believe, is almost here or moving toward this, or they have it, is random panels, right? They hesitate on the unanimous. They went from 2/3 to 3/4, or from 67 to 3/4. But technically, they do have the beyond a reasonable doubt, but it's how they execute it, and it's how they present it. I shared with you the case with the young man. He was convicted, but he wasn't allowed to present evidence his wife was having an affair, even though she admitted it. Like, her testimony, the panel was outside of the room. They didn't get to hear it. And then the guy she's having an affair with lied. But again, they're victims, so they're forgiven. So we have beyond a reasonable doubt, but how it's applied. And it's who holds the commander accountable, who holds the prosecutor, the judge accountable. It's who holds the member of Congress accountable, who put the pressure on them to get that conviction. And I want to tell people, I get it. For some people, the military is the only option for them. So I asked the parents especially, I said, ask the recruiter, ask the influencer, what are they doing about false allegations and wrongful convictions? And for the people who still are not convinced, I want you to Google the Task and Purpose article where Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said, we're going to go after false accusers, right? So that happened in April of 2025, I believe. But ask this question, it doesn't expressly say sexual assault, sexual harassment, and DV. So the military is the king of waivers and not allowing it. It doesn't expressly mention those 3 categories. And so go, what are they doing about false allegations and wrongful convictions? Because if you don't go back and fix this, what's to stop you from doing it again when the next administration comes in? I use the example of Agent Orange. So yeah, we used Agent Orange. We don't want to fix the people we messed up. We just won't do it again. And then burn pits. Hey, we did burn pits. We're not going to do it. It's if they're not held to account, if they're not held to fix, then they will do it again. And again, will you care when it's your son? So I want to say with the military, last thing is it was pressure. It was political pressure. That's why.
I mean, so you're saying that they deflect a lot of these cases. And basically, they want to cover it up. It gives the military a black eye. We need to get rid of this and make it go away, out of sight, out of mind.
Exactly. And that's why they don't want it publicly known that it's happening. Is the military cares about the 4 R's.
Well, yeah. And they know that if we destroy this man's life, he's not going to go talk. There's no one that's going to want to talk to him. The media isn't going to sit down with him. And guess what? He's going to end up going down this dark, sordid path that will ultimately lead to his death while the DOD gets off scot-free.
Exactly. And they also don't think that we're going to get together. So what happens every time I do one of these podcasts, and I want to let your audience know, I've had JAG attorneys come to me, judges, investigators. We've had admirals and generals, but they're all quiet. They will come to me privately, but they don't want to do it publicly. Is that they will see this and go, hey, yep, you're right. But they don't want to get in trouble. They don't want to tell. I had one young lady, she's a West Point graduate and JAG, who helped draft the laws that the Army used, testified in front of Congress. And then she got out as soon as she could because they were abusing it. But I can't get her to come forward. She won't do it. And it's because, it's the long gray line. It's hey, I got mentors who would get in trouble. And so they know it's happening, but it affects all 4 of the 4 R's that they care about. Resources, retention, recruiting, and reputation, right? If this comes out, then guess what? You're not going to get that active recruiting going. And then you might have to use that automatic selective service draft situation. And then will you care about these rules? Or if they adopt them to the civilian force. And I will tell you, Brian, for people who don't believe it could come back, I use the university model because Obama also did what's called a Dear Colleague letter. So he implemented things. They weren't at a court situation, but it was administrative. So in the military, they broke the administrative system and the court system to get these guys. Civilians with the colleges and universities, it was just the administrative side. So let's say a college student is accused falsely and the police drop the charges, they would be punished at the administrative level. So it was started by President Obama. When President Trump came in office, Betsy DeVos balanced the scale, and then President Biden put it back to where it was, and then President Trump balanced the scale again. So guess what happens? You get a new administration, those laws that they put in place are still there, right? You just need the right administration to go, okay. And again, I believe it's to get the votes of women. And again, not all women, because there are a lot of great women out there who understand they want equal rights and equal justice. But I want to ask them as an example. So I told you the military has the sexual harassment thing that came out in 2024. It was the last NDA Biden signed. And there are some women I've talked to who, if you look at them for too long, they consider that sexual harassment. I want your audience to consider that. Is how long can someone look at you and you consider it sexual harassment? And in the military, that's 2 years in prison and a dishonorable discharge, right? I've asked and I've heard between 3 potatoes and 5 potatoes, 3 to 5 seconds, right? Well, then how do you know he's looking at you? How do you know? And I use this last example. There's third-party sexual harassment. So I was talking to a colleague and he said, so let's say you are in a closed office and you tell a joke that's a little off color and somebody not in the room hears it, they can file sexual harassment. We had a situation where we had someone who gave a compliment to a colleague and someone who overheard it felt it was harassing to them. So that's what we've come to. is that law's still on the books, right? So I would love for someone to come forward and say, let's reform this military justice system. Let's make this right. Let's truly be about equal rights, right? So, but there are some people who never wanted equal rights. They wanted an imbalance toward their side. That's what they want.
Well, everybody wants justice and equal rights, but it also comes with, is it going to be convenient for me? And typically people don't really ever care about any social justice until something happens to them, or
True.
a military injustice. Any injustice out there is always it is always ignored. It doesn't exist until it happens to them, and then once it happens to them, they become either very aggressive and very influential and very successful advocates, or they go dark, and that right there, I mean, that's just the way it is. Now, you were saying the last thing that the military is going to ever want is a scandal on their base. They don't want cameras snooping around what's going on. So these convictions keep that bad press away. They keep everything at bay. And then they also send a very clear and concise message to every other troop on that base. You'll be next. And again, I mean, look, if you're in the military, hey, you gotta trust your partner. You can't, just go out to the bar and meet a gal, and the rest is, the birds and the bees, whatever it may be. But when there is this much influence out there by folks that engage veterans to coach them on how to get 100% disabilities from military sexual trauma that they are falsely accusing other service members of, is, again, that is barbaric. I mean, that right there is the lowest of low. And this is not all, but it's a lot. And like I said, you're not the only one that's come forward with a lot of this stuff. You're just one of the only ones that want to come on record and actually talk about it. Now, I have an idea that just kind of popped up through my head as we were talking about this, as you were saying. You look, in the military court of law, it's really not fair. The deck is always going to be stacked against the service member. And that's just the way it is. And because it's the military, it's a colonel as the judge. You've got, some lieutenants and captains that are trying to prove their worth. I need to get a conviction here. And the jury panels, I mean, they don't want to be there. I mean, look, let's face it. And I think, and even like what you said, it doesn't need to be unanimous. I mean, there's so many different levels of the UCMJ. Why not take these most serious of cases out to the civilian sector, get a civilian judge, and then go through the jury panel and only select veterans? And I just think that you may be able to get a more fair trial if you have something like that established. And now these veterans that are going to be coming in, they're civilians now, so it wouldn't be any different than them getting called for jury, summoned for jury for a civilian crime. And I think that right there could be a really good idea. I mean, what are your thoughts on something like that?
Brian, it's brilliant. I think, in a word, it's brilliant. In fact, we have MST survivors who partnered with us. They looked in our cases. They're like, wow. And they know from their own experience it happened. And that is our number one point of agreement, is that these should be civilian led and run. They should take them out of the chain of command. And what no one has said until you is, hey, put civilian veterans on there. They're civilians, so they don't have to worry about the UCMJ now, and so that they can do the right thing. I love it. I think it's brilliant. That would be a great solution. for the big things, the murder, the sexual assault, etc. Now, I will tell you, you're going to get pushback from the military because they like to use the following phrase: good order and discipline. I call it fear to keep other folks in line. So you mentioned the other thing, hey, you come forward, you're next. Here's what I believe military leaders thought. Hey, if we get these convictions on these guys with spotty or no evidence, then nobody's going to get convicted because no one's going to commit any crimes because they're going to see the system as foul. But what they didn't think was that, well, some people will take advantage of that and just make them up. So I agree with you. I think that would be a wonderful idea if they were to do that. That's a great suggestion. We would love to hear about it. Their pushback will be losing good order and discipline control from the commanding officer. And they're also doing things with the non-judicial system. Like an NJP, you talked about Article 15. There's something called titling. Are you familiar with that at all?
No.
So I think the FBI runs it, a database accessible to all law enforcement. So even if you go to, let's say, an NJP, if there's an investigation launched in the military, they title you. If you get investigated for a court-martial, they also title you. And even if you get found not guilty of all crimes, you are still titled for 40 years. It'll say, umpty, ... not guilty. So when an employer does a background search, they'll see you were accused and investigated of something. And even though you were found not guilty, you won't be hired. You won't be allowed to buy a firearm. You won't be allowed to work with law enforcement, children. You can't sponsor a foreign spouse to be a citizen of the United States. There's certain countries that will not allow you to travel to them. So that's if you get found innocent of everything, just because they started an investigation on you, they put you in that database. That's titling. And most people have no idea. We have a former police officer who works with us. Her son was falsely accused. She reached out to 2,000 plus high schools and just to ask, could we tell them how to protect their child, right? If you're going to go in, here's some things. Every one of those principals said no. They don't want this information out. They don't want you to have this, right? So it's why you're especially brave for addressing this. And I want to thank all the military influencers and podcasters who had the courage to do this, because many of them do not, I assure you.
It's very sensitive. It's extremely private, and it's extremely emotional. And cases like this tug at the heartstrings of Americans. And when you bring it up, everybody's going to always, I shouldn't say everybody. Typically, most people are already going to draw the conclusion on guilt or innocence by just looking at you a lot of the times.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe just hearing 5 minutes of the complaint without really digging deep and to look at all of the evidence. And again, there is no reason why the military Uniform Code of Military Justice inside those halls should not ever, ever, ever have a conviction without beyond a reasonable doubt. I mean, that right there, to me, is the Constitution. But it only seems as if that Constitution only applies to civilians, because you basically sign your life away when you join the military. That's why you can't sue the military when you're on active duty, because of the Ferris Doctrine. There are so many things that are in play here, again, that is stacked against the service member. And as you climb in rank, you are more susceptible for these accusations to come, because the military now knows, if we could get rid of this guy, we're going to save several $1 million in retirement down the road. We're going to do this. And it is about the most dishonorable thing that you can do. And I love our military. I love this country. I love our veterans, but there are so many injustices out there for folks like you that have gone down this egregious path. And things like that should never happen.
Brian, I want to piggyback on what you said. I do as well. I love the military. I want them to do the right thing. I want them to continue to be the best. And it means you have to change. You have to fix these things. And I want to say something that resonated is our Pledge of Allegiance says liberty and justice for all, not liberty and justice for some. And
or liberty and justice for civilians. I mean, you would think that if you were in the military, you would have a lot of the same rights as everybody else. You know, we have a lot of these groups out in this country that, you know, these certain tribes, if you will. And I'm going to use, say, the LGBTQ, the gay community, this community, that community, and they fight for rights, but they have the same rights as you and I. The people that don't have the rights are folks in the military, and they need to fight, but you can't, because that boot is not going to come off of you. It is on you, and it ain't going to move. And if you end up on the wrong side of the law, guilty or not, you're done. It's not a fair system.
So Brian, let me just add one thing, not to cut you off. One thing is that someone accused of terrorism, a foreign terrorist tried in the United States, has more rights than members of the United States military. I want your audience to really consider that. Is a terrorist who attacks this great nation has more rights in a courtroom than your military members. And if you think that's right, then don't listen to anything I said. If you think that's right, I don't, right? And so what you just said really resonated with me, and most people don't understand it. They don't know it. And it breaks my heart, because I do love the military. I want them to do the right thing. That's why I tell parents, I never tell anybody not to join. I said, just ask these questions for me before you do. Hey, what are you doing for false allegations and wrongful convictions? And I want you to listen to what they say. And I want you to think about what they should have said and did. And that's it.
Arvis, do you still have a felony conviction on your record?
Of course I do. Well, okay, let me back up. Technically, the military does not label felonies and misdemeanors. The way it's interpreted in the civilian world is anything that you were tried of that has a sentence or found guilty of over a year is quote unquote considered a felony. So I'll give this example. I did a training where I was trying to get a job, right? And so I do the training, I pay for it, and I'm getting ready to graduate. I'm excited. And then they give a questionnaire at the end, because you have to get a part of their liability insurance. And it says, have you ever been convicted of a felony or a misdemeanor? So I'm sitting there and my class is all writing down like, no, right? And I could legally have said no, but instead I said, no, I haven't, but I've been convicted in a military court. And I went into detail, and it was just a little box, and I'm happy to explain. Even though I'd paid thousands for that, I wasn't allowed to get certified. I didn't get a certificate. I didn't graduate. And I go, but I did. And they said, look, we can't get you on the liability policy or anything. So then whenever I would look for a training, I would ask in advance, hey, here's what happened. And I've had men, they couldn't get insurance licenses. So I met a guy who was one of the biggest meth dealers in the West, and he could get one. But a military veteran who had been titled for this, the sex assault, sexual harassment, DV, they couldn't get an insurance license. They try and be lawyers. They try and become nurses. And that's the hidden thing that people don't understand and even the members whose cases have been overturned. We had a member, he tried to go and purchase a firearm, for instance, and he was denied access, and he was found not guilty. His case was overturned completely. He was denied access to a country he wanted to visit. He got pulled from the plane for a special inspection, and he was with his family. And so I tell people about all the things that get destroyed in your life when the military does what they do. And people just don't know, and they just don't understand.
Yeah, you went through a life-changing event. What has this done to you mentally?
I will tell you, it's a push-pull. It's made me more resilient. I've talked to many men. I've talked to them out of committing suicide. And the reason I think I've been successful is because I considered it myself. It's, Brian, I've had one speeding ticket in my life. That's the extent of law enforcement involvement that I've had. So I go from one speeding ticket to I've been convicted of a sex offense on the registry. And so I tell them I understand, right? I said, but the people who do believe that you're innocent will not if you do this, right? I said, you have people who love you and believe you. And I want to share one other thing just so people understand. The state of Virginia removed me from the registry in 2021. So I started a petition, which thank you. You have it under my name there on change.org, is the state of Virginia contacted the military after reviewing my case, after I'd already been on the registry almost 8 years, and said, hey, this guy's saying this. Is this true? They investigate. And then they take me off. To date, or what I was told is I was the only person in the state of Virginia ever taken off the registry who didn't go to court and who didn't get their case overturned. So I called a person I know who worked for them, and I'm like, hey, is this real? What's going on? And they were scared to lose their job. But what they told me is they said, hey, they did see this. They did contact the military, and they went through your whole court transcript. And here was the biggest piece. Your accuser said you used no force. And I said, well, of course not. I didn't, assault. And what the person explained to me is, wait a minute. She said you didn't use any threats. You didn't use physical force, and you didn't use any enticements. And he says you have to have an element of force to be convicted of sex offense in any jurisdiction, including the military. So Virginia was worried about being sued by me because they had me on the registry. They just did it as a favor of the military. So people in my group thought I had cut a side deal. They were like, Arvis, you got taken off. I said, look, I didn't know it was going to happen. And because I had that relationship, I found out why. But then when I went to an attorney to sue Virginia, they wanted $250,000, right? Just to get started. We've had a lot of members file civil suits against the military, but the Department of Justice represents DOD. And I'm not going to say they have an unlimited pot of money, but it's unlimited compared to what the people we have. And so they'll just run you out of money. And so you're right. That's what you see. And again, for your audience members who are like, Arvis, I can't believe this is too much. Look, I understand. That's why I'm like, let's go to the VA. Let's pull without names all of the people who got this VA disability for it with zero evidence. Just those, just with the zero evidence. They just checked a box, and then they have an algorithm that pops. And we know because an investigator told us who works with them. And it's a she, and she's a victim. She is upset that she's not allowed to investigate these false accusers. And then let's work backwards to say, okay, they file these false claims. Who did they impact? And then civilians got paid as well. In fact, I'll share one last story, I promise, with the audience. We had a group contact us because they hired a female veteran who was a victim of military MST. She had accused 2 of her current civilian coworkers of rape. So they call us and they go, hey, what do we do? Because they've seen the interviews and stuff like that. And we go, hey, do you have cameras in your place of employment? And they did, right? You have civilian employers who've got cameras in the copy room, everywhere but the bathroom, basically. So we go, pull the camera, let's see. And they have camera with audio. They found out she was trading favors, right? Like she's the one who pulled the mattress out and set it up. They have it all on tape with audio. Her only punishment was she got fired. She got fired. And so now I don't know if she was a false accuser in the military, but I do know that as a civilian, she was twice over. And then last May, there was a case, it was a National Guard case where a female, I think she got 2 years of probation. She was, I think, enlisted, and she got with one of the doctors in his car. I think it was in Pennsylvania, if I'm not mistaken. And the only thing that saved him was she recorded it and sent it to her female group chat and said how she wanted to do it again and how it was great. But when she found out the military was going to pursue charges against her for fraternization, she says, oh, he raped me. And the civilian police who were investigating pulled from her phone her taking the video. her sending it to her group chat. And so I tell some advocates, I said, wait a minute, he was facing 30, 40 years in prison, and he still was prosecuted for the fraternization. So if it's a victim, well, the military forgives all of the things they do, but he still was punished even though he was the victim of false accusations. And her punishment was, I think she may have gotten 30 days in jail and 2 years of probation. That was last May. It was in Pennsylvania. You can search for it. And then people have heard of the Johnny Depp case, but guess what?
Yeah.
They thought it only happened to superstars, right? You really thought it only happened to superstars. And then I'm going to name 2 Biden officials, if I can, that we got to. And one was Kathleen Hicks. She was a Deputy Secretary of Defense, the number 2. She saw some of the interviews that we were doing. She said she would do an investigation on false accusations and make it public. Guess what happened, Brian? She completed the investigation and then ghosted us. She never made it public. So the person who communicated with her directly, I'll name him. His name is James Thomas, retired Marine Corps, Sergeant Major. He has a radio talk show called Tell It Like It Is out of Montgomery, Alabama. He talked to her on the phone directly, and that went away. He also talked to Carolyn Cass, who at that time, she was the CIA General Counsel under Obama. She was the DOD, now DOD General Counsel under Biden. So we got that high, and they said that they would do stuff, and then nothing happened. So I can't prove that it got to President Biden. I know it got to those 2. So did they tell Secretary of Defense Austin? Did he tell the president? I can't tell you that. But we got to those 2 senior Biden administration officials, and nothing was done.
I want to completely reiterate here what Arvis and I are speaking of, folks, is sexual predators, true sexual predators in this country need to be removed and eliminated from society. We are not talking about folks that have done bad atrocities, and we're sitting here, talking about justice for the actual perpetrators. We want justice for every victim out there, 100%. What we're talking about here are the false accusers who later benefit monetarily from destroying a man's life. And we know that folks out there are scandalous, and they can be very ill-willed and a heart that has been completely hardened. And, and it's sad. It truly is sad. Their lives have been completely ruined. And, it's hard to bounce back from something like that unless you just start your own business or start your own advocacy group. But guess what? You have to live it every day. And that right there is a lot to unpack when you're trying to heal yourself, but you can't ultimately heal yourself, but you're around other like-minded individuals who are fighting the same fight that you've been fighting. So this absolutely becomes a life-changing and altering event that you can never escape. And I mean, imagine reliving this nightmare over and over and over and over again. And that's what so many of these folks go through. Arvis, being everything that you went through in the Navy, the 7 counts of sexual assault, the fight of your life. How many years did you serve in the Navy?
At the time of the conviction, 18, 21 if you count the time when you're on appellate leave, which is considered active duty. So I'll say sometimes 18, sometimes 21 when you count the appellate leave.
So you had really a lifetime of service. I mean, when you start looking at numbers like that, do you get any retirement pay or any VA benefits?
0. As an officer, you get none.
So because of these false accusations, not only did it destroy you mentally, but it also destroyed you financially.
Yes, you get nothing.
So your financial future, everything that you put into the military, your 18 years of honorable service, all the good that you've done was erased because of a false accusation that has literally been proven in court.
Correct.
Absolutely railroaded.
They take everything and then they stop you from being able for gainful civilian employment. Because think about it. If they're a government contractor, are they going to bring you on? They've got liability protections. And so I could say a couple of professions, construction, warehousing, where some people have found success. But even then, some people have been let go.
But that's low level. When you're operating a forklift in a warehouse, that's intended for an 18 to a 22-year-old kid, not an 05 who spent 21 years in the military defending our Constitution and our country while leading troops into battle.
And that's the thing I tell people, Brian, that it's so disruptive. It destroys every part of your life. You can't go to kids' birthday parties sometimes. You couldn't go to your kid's school. Until I was taken off the registry, I couldn't go to my kid's first day of school.
Yeah, you can't even coach youth sports.
You can't coach. You can't go to youth sports.
You've done nothing wrong, but you've been labeled as this monster.
And I tell people, you can't take your kids to Disneyland or theme park. I had a guy crying because his daughter's class wanted, the father of this young girl to go with them it was Six Flags, but he can't go. So he had to lie to his daughter because he can't go because he's on the registry. And, there's something called Cedar Point in Ohio. And in some states, they send letters to all of your neighbors. So you mentioned having your own business. We have men who've been falsely accused who started their own business because they couldn't get jobs. And then they go for contracts. And then the opposition passes around their conviction and they lose it. So their businesses have been bankrupted. So And again, what they will try to do is get a friend or family member to lead the business, and then they become a contractor, a 1099 to it, so that, and they have to be extremely quiet. So that's why you don't see more of them speaking out. They'll speak to me privately, but you have a target on your back.
Yeah, exactly.
Real. I've had people curse me out, call me everything. We hate you, Arvis. And I'm like, but I love you, and I hope you get justice. And so and what I tell people is, you have people who are willing to die for their country, but they're not willing to speak up when their country's doing something that's wrong. What sense does that make? What sense does that make when you think about our founding fathers? And again, I say the Pledge of Allegiance is liberty and justice for all, and not liberty and justice for some. And if you believe that the way I do, for all, then you'll help. And if you don't, then I get it. Look, I hope that's the justice you get, right? If you believe in unfair injustice and people just getting it, and that's with a lot of people, they'll go, well, you did X, so you deserve Y, regardless of what it is. So, Brian, I've asked ladies this. I said, okay, so a prostitute who gets raped, does she deserve justice?
Of course.
They said, of course.
Yeah.
I said, what about someone who smokes, but they need medical care? Do they deserve that?
Absolutely.
Well, so I go, okay, yeah, they were with a lot of ladies. Yep, they had a menage a trois. Yep, they may have done adultery, but do they deserve justice? And then after those first examples, do they finally go, okay, yes.
Incredible what can happen to good men literally starting over and trying to have the stamina and the energy to stand up and fight for what's right. Arvis, how can other folks help your mission, or how can veterans get a hold of you if they find themselves in the same predicament that you were in?
So 3 things, and then how to help or how to contact me. So 1, please go to our change.org, www.change.org/unjustucmj, sign it and share it. Number 2, before your kids join, or ask the recruiters, ask them, what are you doing for false accusations and wrongful convictions? And then 3rd, and most important, when you see your politicians, you ask them, what are you doing for false accusations as well? And then to contact me, arvisowens@yahoo.com. It's a very old email address. I've had it since I was 22 years old. It's easy, no space, no hyphen. They can reach out to me. You can reach out to any podcaster or radio show that I've done, and they can contact me as well. And I've had victims contact me, which is fine. I've had people falsely accused. Usually it's their family, their parents, a lot of times moms. And my hat's off to, again, the female veterans who did come forward, right? It was a female veteran that helped me find you, Brian. It was a female veteran that taught me how they were pushing cases at this nonprofit that they knew were false. It was female veterans who she was a paralegal, and she saw 500 cases of false accusations at court-martial because she was serving as a paralegal. That was 1 year on one Navy base. That was San Diego. And she came forward after she retired and spoke up. She spoke up then, they fired her, and she was the number 1 E6. So we have some amazing female veterans who also are appalled at what's happening, and they've had the courage to step forward and say enough. So I want to thank them personally. I want to thank you. I want to thank your audience for taking the time to listen to this very difficult topic. And I understand how you feel, regardless of whether you support us or not. And I want to thank you for listening.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.